Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and this is the JVC FWX1. This is the latest earphone in collaboration between Drop and JVC, and if you remember, the last time these two companies combined forces, we got the FDX1, which might sound like the exact same collection of letters and numbers, but technically a little bit different. The FDX1, not this one, was an earphone that I actually quite like. In fact, it's still probably one of my favorite single dynamic driver earphones, but JVC has a whole bunch of different single dynamic driver earphones, and the FDX1 is actually based on one of their cheaper models. Here, the FWX1 is based on a slightly more expensive JVC model, and in fact, the drop version here comes in at a higher price. This thing costs around 450 bucks, which is not cheap. And for that, it looks like we get kind of the same thing. It's a single dynamic driver earphone. It looks very similar physically. The box obviously is very similar, but there are going to be some differences. So the differences that I know physically, this thing is actually made out of wood. And I don't just mean like the housing is made out of wood, which I think it is, but in fact, the driver dome is actually made out of wood, like for real. That's true of a number of different JVC earphones, and I think that's kind of interesting. The other thing that's going to be different here is that, at least according to Drop, the tuning is going to be different here. This is what they call kind of a warmer alternative to the FDX1. And in fact, the FDX1 I would describe as a pretty lean, maybe even bright sort of neutral tune. If this goes for a warmer tonality, could be a nice little alternative, but we got to find out for ourselves. So in this video, this is just kind of a first look video. I have not heard this. This is not a review. If you want the review for the FWX1, chill out for a little bit. Subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and then YouTube will let you know when I'm live with the review. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up the FWX1. We'll find out what we get inside the box. Then I'm also going to throw it up on my measurement rig, find out what the frequency response of this earphone is, and compare it to the JVC FDX1, which again, mildly different in numbers and letters, but a very different earphone from the FW1 that we have here now. But I guess without further ado, let's just go ahead and head to the table and give it a spin and find out what's inside this box. So yeah, the FWX1, I promise you, this is a different model than the last one. But I think what's inside the box probably going to be almost exactly the same. In fact, we've got plenty of spoilers here, which we'll try to avoid. But if you didn't believe me, yes, it does have a wood dome carbon diaphragm for the dynamic driver. Like, they've got pictures of it on, I'm not going to be able to take this thing apart and show you, but they've got pictures of it on their website. It actually has a wood pattern on the dynamic driver, which is pretty neat. Otherwise, like, there's not going to be much we'll find out about this box. Nice and simple packaging. So just go ahead and crack it open and see what's inside. There we go. I figure I can outsmart this box. We've got the cable, we've got plenty of paperwork. We've got, looks like, oh, the earpieces are interestingly not inside the box. Put that aside, pull this aside. Box is empty, proof. I'll throw this thing down here. Here's the paperwork. If you are curious, we've got our cautions. Like, you got to be careful with these things. These are not kids' toys. These are earphones, and they're dangerous, or something like that. I don't know why they have precautions, but I guess be careful. It looks like some sort of warranty card or something like that. We're not going to read that today. We'll put that to the side. Let's put the earpieces aside here for a second and find out. Let's see, what do we got here? We've got the cable, and on first impression, this looks to be the same cable that comes with the FDX1. And if that's the case, that's a good thing, because I love the cable on the FDX1. Like, I'm not exaggerating. The cable on the FDX1 is just about my favorite cable on an IM, and this does appear to be, if not exactly the same, pretty much the same. So what I love about this cable, you can just kind of see, like right now, the behavior of it is quite nice. Like, it lies flat. It is, in fact, let's see if we can show this on camera. It is actually a flat cable, or slightly flat. You can see that here it's a little bit narrower than if I twist it sideways, where you can see it's essentially two cables side by side, which sometimes can be a pain in the butt, but honestly, I think that JVC did a really good job with this cable. It's kind of luxurious looking. It's handsome. It's got a nice weight to it. They do have a chin slider in here, which is, yeah, moderately functional. It does slide itself around a little bit. But I think notably also is that the the cable here, it's MMCX connectors on the top, first of all, but you might be noticing that there are no preformed ear hooks. So assuming this is like the FDX1, this earphone can be worn either cable down or with the cable wrapped around the back of your ears, depending on how you prefer to wear it. So we'll give that a little test in a little bit, but otherwise, just say I like that cable. Well, here we'll take a look at the little carry case, little pouch that it comes with, and I imagine this is also where we will have our ear tips. Release it, my friend. You don't need it. All right. So here you go. Here's the little carry case. I have the same carry case that came with the FDX1, and it's nice and small and compact, I suppose, but the material on it, honestly, is not the most robust. So if you're using this as sort of a transport for your JVCs, just note that this might not be the most durable case out there, but it is handsome and functional. We got our magnetic lid, but then also inside here, we've got, actually take a look at that. We've got kind of like a red felt. So this is slightly different than the case with the FDX1, but just about the same. But here we've got our ear tips, and like the FDX1, this comes with JVC's Spiral Dot Plus, which if you're not familiar with these tips, well, one, Spiral Dot, you can buy these on Amazon pretty easily. I don't know if you can show this on camera, but inside of the nozzles, they've got these little sort of a dotted, what do you call it, dimpled pattern. I don't know, supposedly that's supposed to play with the treble in some way. I can't confirm or deny that, but what's nice about these ones in particular, the plus variant that comes with this, is that they're actually just like super gummy and grippy. I don't know if that really comes across here on the camera, but like how slow they are to recover just kind of indicates how gummy and grippy these things are. They give you generally a pretty nice fit. My one complaint about these tips is that the nozzles are also they're frankly a little bit too soft. And so I don't have the issue so much when I use these on my JVCs, but when I use them on some other earphones, the soft nozzle right there means that they do come off a little bit too easily. So maybe one complaint here with the spiral dots. The other thing to point out here, with the FDX1, these little cutouts would have been where the swappable nozzles would fit in. The FWX1 does not have the swappable nozzles like the FDX1 does, and I guess we can just go ahead and pull out these earpieces from their bag and kind of demonstrate it. DNTR saying no wood ear tips, SMH. Yeah, the ear tips unfortunately are not made out of wood. They are made out of, in fact, this really rubbery, gummy material, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. But yeah, here's the earpieces. Let's go ahead and punch in on these things so you can observe them in all their wooden glory. And yeah, the shells are in fact made out of, at least they look like they're made out of wood, and I'm pretty sure that's like a real texture to the wood. I don't know. I can't tell if they smell like wood or not, but that's the earpiece. Pretty simple shape. Let me see. I wasn't sure about this. So unlike the FDX1, it does not appear that the nozzles on these things rotate. So the FDX1, the whole body like rotates around the nozzle, which is kind of an interesting fit, but I personally actually don't like it. So I guess it's a nice thing that this thing doesn't rotate. I'm wondering what that means for wearing this thing over ear or under ear. But we'll play around with that in a little bit. This does say it is a left earpiece, but maybe if you wore it under ear, you would want to rotate it. I'm not sure. We'll figure this stuff out. But there's your nozzle, pretty typical screen mesh. And the ear tip fits on here, just kind of a standard medium-sized ear tip. I guess worth also pointing out real quickly, this does come with 5 different sizes of JVC ear tips, which is pretty nice. You know, most of the times you'll get 3 sizes of ear tips, and usually that's plenty. But when you're going for the maximal custom fit, it is nice to have the in-between sizes. But let me go ahead and throw this thing onto a cable, and then I guess we'll give it a quick fit test before I throw it on my measurement rig and we measure the frequency response. But otherwise, actually, I did want to point to this. They do have the JVC branding here on one side and then the drop branding on the right side. One thing that's kind of interesting about this model is that, so I mentioned JVC has a number of single dynamic driver earphones at a bunch of different prices. I have the FDX1, which is based on the FD01. JVC also has the FWO1, which you would think the FWX1 would be the drop variant of the FWO1. But curiously, in all the literature here about the FWX1, drop compares this to JVC's more expensive FW1800. I have not heard all of these earphones, so I don't know which one this is going to be based on. I'm going to make a frequency response of this one. We'll see, how it compares to the FDX1, but unfortunately, I'm not really totally sure which model this is based on, because based on the number, or based on the numbering here in the model number, like I expect that this would be Drop's version of the FWO1. But I was pointing this out as I was looking at this thing externally, because externally it actually looks more like the FW1800 than it does look like the FWO1. And that's a whole bunch of letters and numbers, and I'm use this moment real quickly, just kind of like shame JVC or something like that. Like, I'm not a big fan of using shame to coerce people into certain things, but I don't know. We can do better with the naming of our earphone models, but that is neither here nor there. Let me actually go ahead and pull this thing out. I think it's pretty handsome looking, frankly, sitting on a table there, but let's pull it out and throw it into my dome and see how this thing fits. And I think by default, this thing is made to fit with the cable down. Let's see. So I've got it worn cable down there. You can take a look at it inside my head. Actually pull this one out so I'm not completely sealing myself off, but there you go. Fairly simple fit. Like, honestly, it's an easy fit, right? It just kind of plugs in. It doesn't have a large body that's taking up a lot of space in my concha bowl. I think because of that, and the FDX1 kind of has this property, this issue, as well as it's just not the most secure fitting IM in my ear. So let me go ahead and wear it over ear. That's not going to work. So let me swap sides and see if wearing it over ear is also an option. And I think that is actually an option. So here I'm wearing the FWX1 over ear. And I think this will probably be, honestly, the more secure fit, because you do have the cable wrapped around back here to support the earphone. Again, still not taking up a lot of room in my concha bowl, but it does seem to be more supported by the cable. And I think that's going to make it more stable. The one thing to note, though, is you can see this is the red side on my left ear. You are going to have to swap the earpieces on the cable, which shouldn't be a problem. But for now, we're going to leave it as is, and we're going to measure this thing. So for those of you who are not familiar with this stuff, I have a rig over here. Let me pull it into camera view. This is basically a microphone, and it's a microphone that is designed to measure the frequency response of earphones. I'm reaching over there to plug it in. So basically what I do is I insert this into the microphone like so. And then I hit a button in a program called Room Equalizer Wizard, or REW for short. And it will produce a frequency response graph from which we can start to speculate on what this thing sounds like. The frequency response is going to tell you kind of what flavor the sound is, right? It's going to tell you, is it a V-shaped sound signature? Is it mid-range focused? Is it treble and bass? It's going to tell you that kind of stuff. It's not going to tell you necessarily that it sounds good or bad. Although if you know your personal favorites in terms of frequency responses, you can start to make pretty good guesses. But the frequency responses are honestly probably just like the best way to differentiate the sound signature of IMs when you can't hear them for yourself. So that's why I think these things are actually pretty good to show. And what we're going to do is we're going to measure it. I'm going to throw it up onto my site, which is right here. If you're not familiar with this site, this is squig.link. I would head over to there right now, or maybe in a minute, because I'm going to measure this, take the measurement, upload it to squig.link, and then you can play around with the frequency response for yourself and make your own conclusions, I suppose. I mean, I'll try and help you interpret it as best I can, but I guess to first do that, we got to make this measurement. So this is the program we use. It is popping up over here. Let's put you on the main screen. No, I actually don't need that. I just need this. And I'm going to hit a button, and ostensibly this thing will make a frequency response. Let me make sure I got my volume at the right spot. It looks pretty good. And I'm going to shut up and hit enter. Okay, so I'm going to try that again at a slightly higher volume, but I also wanted to make sure that my resonance peak is happening at the 8K where I want it to, and it looks like it's not quite happening there. So I'm going to push this, basically going to insert the IM a little bit deeper into the microphone and hopefully move that resonance peak closer to where we want it. And if it doesn't work, we might have to move over to a smaller ear tip. But for now, let's go with that, and let's do this measurement again. Let's see. Try it at higher volume and see if that works. All right, so we got more volume out of it, which is good. And that's basically just moving the frequency response graph a little bit up in my view here. Doesn't matter that much. But you can still see this peak that I want to appear at 8K is not appearing at 8K. So I'm actually going to go ahead and swap over to a smaller ear tip real quickly so that I can ostensibly get this thing fitted in a little bit deeper and get that resonance peak aligned with where we want it to be. And it's not that important to understand exactly why, just that I want that peak to be there because that's where that peak appears for pretty much all my other measurements, and it makes it more comparable. All right, one more time. All right, that looks a little bit more successful. We got our peak at around 8K, and I gotta say, this is a pretty warm looking earphone. I guess that's exactly what Drop suggested. Let me real quickly measure the right side to see if we can get this thing to, we'll see what like the channel balancing is like between these, and hopefully this won't take too much longer in order to get the second frequency response. All right, so that was R. This one was L. And because I swapped to the smaller tips, you can see I got that resonance peak at 8K just about perfect. And here, honestly, we are seeing a little bit of channel imbalance. I would say the amount of channel imbalance that we're seeing here is, it's not great, to be perfectly honest. You can see that, and when I'm talking about channel imbalance, you can see that the difference between the blue and the purple lines here, the left and the right channels, it deviates in a couple of places. I think it's probably, it's to the point that I doubt I will audibly hear a difference here, but it is also the sort of thing that you kind of hope to not see in especially like a $500 or a $450 earphone. But let me go ahead and save all these measurements real quick. Nope, not that. JVC FWX1. All right, I gotta export these things in a couple of different ways. Apologize for the downtime here as you watch me type things into a computer. That was the R channel, I believe. Yep. Okay, and then I'm going to go over to this other screen that you can't see. You have to use your imagination, and let me upload this measurement real quick. So we're uploading it in real time, updating a website. Did you think that you were going to be tuning into a stream where you watch a dude update a website? Well, you're in luck. That's what you're doing right now. And one last upload, and this should work. Let's see. Uno minuto. There we go. And now we're ready. So I'm going to go back over to here. And let's go ahead and go to squig.link. If you're not here already, check it out. Squig.link, that's your URL. Not complicated. And I'm going to do a shift reload on here. And there we've got our measurement for the JVC FWX1. And you can see how this thing stacks up versus my neutral target, right? Which is what the dotted line is here. And you can see pretty strong deviations, to be honest. So this tuning, I'm pretty interested to see what I think about this. But initially on first impression, as I look at this looks like a V-shaped sound signature, which is to say, look down here in the mid bass and the sub bass, quite a bit of emphasis, especially that's a pretty meaty mid bass. And it's interesting that Drop talked about specifically reducing the bass on the FWX1. The way that they described it, again, they kept comparing the FWX1, which is what we've got here, to the JVC FW1800, which is not an earphone I've heard, but they kept comparing it to that and saying reducing the bass versus that. So my guess is that the FW1800 would actually be even bassier than this, but this is a pretty bassy set based on this frequency response measurement. And just to clarify, like this is not my critique of it. This is just kind of observations about what we got. My critique of this is going to come with the review. And I got to spend time actually listening to this thing before I review it and tell you what I think about how it sounds. But we can still kind of speculate based on this frequency response. So, as I was saying, sub bass, mid bass, quite elevated here. Through the mid range, you can see, you know, this is about where it's going to cross over no matter what. The upper mid range, this is interesting because it's somewhat relaxed actually. And this gap that you see here between the dotted line and the blue line, the measured line, suggests to me that the vocals in this thing are actually going to be somewhat pulled back, and maybe you could even describe it as recessed, especially when you consider that bass elevation that's there. I have a feeling this is going to sound like a very, very warm, sort of thick sound. Again, interesting that Drop describes it as a less bassy version of the FD1800, and also that they described it as a mid-range focus, because based on this look, it looks very much like, honestly, a classic V-shaped sound signature, because you got that recessed mid-range, you got the big old bass, and then you've got, you know, a little bit of treble emphasis here. Now, I will caveat this little peak that you see here at 8K, again, as I was measuring it, you saw that I was moving that little peak around. This peak is kind of an artifact of the measurement rig. When I listen to earphones, usually I'll hear a peak like this, but it's not always exactly at 8K. It kind of depends on how deep it fits into my ear, which again, very similar to how it operates with this rig, but I am guessing there's going to be some sort of resonant peak of treble in that region. But other than that, honestly, the treble, it's mostly focused in this presence region, which is an interesting place to focus the emphasis. I think it's going to be a pretty contrasty sound if this mid bass and sub bass isn't so overwhelming as to just overly dominate the sound. We'll see when I actually get around to listening to it. But I think honestly, that's about as much as I can tell you about the JVC cross drop, or the drop cross JVC FWX1. If you're interested in checking this thing out, I do have a link in the description down below to Drop. And shout out to Drop for sending this in for review. While you're down there, if you found this video helpful or interesting, or you liked it or whatever, and you want to see more of it, please do hit the like button. It helps me out. Subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell so that YouTube will let you know next time I'm live. And if you're here live, we'll hang around for a little bit. Let's have a little chat and let's talk about the FWX1. Let me bounce over here and catch up with live chat as best as possible. How's it going? Happy Monday afternoon. Human friendly, thank you for joining earlier and keeping me company while I was kind of setting up. But yeah, I will always return the dab. Big Boss saying, talking about the Emu Rosewoods, of course. Yeah, so reference to the title of this video, which is, I changed the name actually, I think after Big Boss commented to, what did I call it, like driven by wood or something like that. I struggled with this one, right? How much do I lean into the immature wood jokes that are definitely funny, but also definitely immature? And then what made it really difficult was that I was checking out JVC's website ahead of doing this video, just kind of doing some research and catching myself up to speed on their different models. And their website just has some like, it's just got some things, like it says in big bold letters, a commitment to wood, which maybe that only sounds funny if you're an immature idiot like me, but I kind of feel like that just kind of sounds funny to almost everybody. So yeah, Big Boss bless. Tegan Clap Brown, howdy. Always good to see you. War Samir, how you doing? Shimon, what's up? How you doing? Good to see you there as well. You won't stick around all the way though, probably. All right. Well, thanks for letting me know that you're gonna quit on me. That's cool. Scott Pledger, always good to see you, man. How's it going? Humdrum Ant saying, hey, what's up? Elazar, what's up? Good to see you again as well. Raboni Lad, how much are these? They're $450. The FW1800. Again, I'm a little confused by which earphone this one's actually based on. The FW1800 though, I think is like a $600 earphone at least. Might even be a little bit more normally, but I think it was around $600 on drop. So yeah, these things are definitely not cheap. Corgi Staniel saying enviro-friendly packaging, I'm assuming. Yeah, honestly, I think the packaging that these things come in, that little simple cardboard box, it's not flashy. It doesn't have any anime waifus on the outside of it, but I'm honestly like, that's all I need. I know it's kind of an expensive IM and it comes in packaging that looks really minimal and you could even say cheap, but if it's environmentally friendly, if that's the way that you want to justify it and make it sound a little bit more exciting, go for it. But me personally, I don't need a lot of pomp and circumstance in my packaging. A simple cardboard box, that's fine. Scott Pledger, would you use these while getting your carb on? That is, you worked wood and carbon into the same sentence. That's pretty impressive. Yeah. So these things, they have a wood dome. The rest of the diaphragm is still carbon, or I mean, it's some, what do they call it? DLC probably. Some sort of carbon material that's more flexible than the wood. But there does appear to be real wood in the driver, which is pretty interesting. Big Boss, is earphone plus warranty equal warranty? Wow. I think we can make that combination sort of pun happen with ergonomics. I don't know about warranty. That one's going to be a bit of a stretch. Elazar, staring at my non-existent kidneys. Did you already sell your kidneys for a blessing too? In which case, not a bad trade. Scott saying, also, I have to say that I love the fact that you properly wind your cables. I've been trying to get my fiance to do the over-under wrap for cables for a year to no avail. Oh yeah, the roadie wrap is the only way to do it for a couple of reasons. So one, I'm just a bit of a stickler for tidiness and doing the roadie wrap, which is what I'm doing here, right? Going over and under. It lets the cables lie nice and flat. No, I just popped this thing off its cable. That's interesting. I don't remember this being loose. I'll play with that later. But yeah, like when you wrap it like this, like it sits nice and tidy and like it just looks handsome. So that's reason number one to do this. Reason number two is that when you do this, and I did this in my video on how to do it, you can just pull the cable straight and you don't get any kinks in it. So that's reason number two. And then reason number three, this is probably honestly the most important one to me, but it's also the one that's like the hardest to demonstrate. It's that the way that a lot of people wind their cables, right? With this sort of just doing like this sort of deal, you are, as you're doing that, you're putting a lot of sort of lateral torsion, or like, I'm not a physicist. What kind of torsion is that? Just torsion. You're putting a lot of torsion on the insides of the cable, which can, over time, actually cause the cable to warp. It's kind of interesting to see that this sort of damage appears to have been really, really emphasized with the cable on the Moondrop Aria, which is cloth covered. I don't know if all cloth covered cables have that issue in particular, but it is interesting to see a lot of people that have Moondrop Aria cables, and they just look like a complete mess right now. And I have the suspicion that if they had been roadie wrapping their cables, they wouldn't have that problem. And yes, Big Boss, rodeo wrapping your cables it should be part of just standard wedding vows. I guess Scott Pledger missed that note. I missed that note too. Oh, Scott, so you're a former sound tech. So watching people wrap their cables makes you wince. Yeah, the that little move right there, I'm not going to tell you I haven't done that move. I'm primarily with like video game controllers growing up, right? You take the PlayStation controller and you just wrap that cable around it and you stuff it to the side. And then you wonder why a couple years later the cable's just all like weird and torsioned, funky. It's because of that. Brandon, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Valphonics, did someone say wood? That's right. We are talking about wood today, and we're trying to do it with a straight face, so let's be adults about it. You don't have to be adults. It's fine. DNTRX saying, jokes aside, I love how they look. And yeah, honestly, I know these are really dark. Like the finish on the wood is quite dark. So it might just look like a black IM on camera, but hopefully the pattern is coming through a little bit. Honestly, I think this is a really pretty handsome IM, especially on this cable, which again, I love this cable. And the simple understated look, I think is a really good looking IM. So I'm with you. Oh yeah, Big Boss saying JVC is trying to emulate Sony's naming conventions. I don't know what it is with these companies. Sony also, I think, is really bad at naming their IMs. Yeah, I'm not sure what's up. They're also really bad at naming their Walkmans. Rob Hawk saying, I have the FDX1 and I really like it. I also have the FDX1 and I also really like it. It's interesting. That was an IM I reviewed about 2 years ago. It's been a while, but it's still one of those ones that I go back to. I dip into every once in a while just to remind myself, like, how good can a single dynamic driver earphone be? And that one is still kind of, I think that's still my favorite single dynamic driver earphone. The sound signature, the frequency response on the FDX1. In fact, we didn't talk about that at all. You know what? Let's do that real quickly. This is a function of squig.link, as you can compare the frequency responses, right? So we have the graph here of the FWX1, but I've also got a graph of the FDX1. And this is how they compare. And you can see they're pretty drastically different. In fact, the FDX1, it comes with a couple of different filter settings, so you can play with these and try it out to see exactly how it measures differently. But let's go ahead and go with the 50%, the 50% filter, just for comparison sakes, and see how this thing compares to, again, my target, which is the dotted line. And you can see how the FDX1, it's actually a little bit light on bass, which is frankly, I don't know, I would say its bass is just about where I want it. It's got a really nice bass body and a character to it, but it is bass light. But then you can see up here in the upper mid-range area, the FDX1 fairly closely follows my target. It's a little bit hot in the presence region, which just gives vocals a little bit of a metallic edge to them. But for the most part, like, honestly, this is just about where I like it. But then you can see really the big difference here with the FWX1. And I always have to pause when I say those letters. If you don't know about this tool also, there's this inspect button that once you do that, as you mouse over it, you can kind of start to actually see the calculation and the difference in these. So I can say, like, you know, at its peak, it looks like the difference between them is about 5 decibels of upper mid-range difference between the FD and the FW. And that's quite a bit. If you've ever played with EQ and changed something, especially a range this broad, by 5 decibels, it's going to very drastically change the sound. So honestly, this FWX1 is going to sound quite different than the FD01. And then the other thing here is in the treble region. You can see, you know, this is where, especially in the presence and lower treble, you get more emphasis than you got on the FDX1. So How much that's necessary to cut through this really thick lower mid-range and mid-bass, honestly, it's probably pretty necessary. But does that mean it's going to come across as sharp and sibilant or anything like that? That's what's going to, I can't tell that from a graph. I'm going to have to actually listen to it to figure that out. Elazar, the models are so confusing. I'm glad it's not just me, and maybe I could have worked better to get the model numbers better, but I don't know. I don't know what they should do. Oh, Scott Pledger, good idea. The frequency response, if it looked like a tree, that would have been cool, but too bad. Wenkern, I think I measured the KZ AST, but I did not actually listen to it. Again, over here in the frequency responses, if you want to check it out. This maybe would be a good demo or a good answer to the question why I haven't reviewed a KZ in a while. So the last KZ that I bought was the KZ ASX. And I think before that, the last KZ I reviewed was the ZS10 Pro. That's the wrong one. ZS10 Pro, which honestly, this is not a bad IM, not my favorite tuning. But it seemed like after this, they kept releasing a bunch of earphones that had very, very similar frequency responses. So I just wasn't that interested. Then they finally came out with this, the ASX, which was like a 10 driver balanced armature set, whole new design. I decided, you know what? I'm gonna take another chance with KZ. And I bought this thing. It's like $100, maybe $110. And it doesn't sound good. And this is the frequency response of it. If you want to know like my explanation of why this doesn't sound good, this is just like a very thick, warm BA bass V-shaped sound signature that is just kind of like muddy and soft. And it's just not good. I don't know. Someone out there probably likes the ASX. I'm not trying to say that you're wrong, but for my taste, the ASX is really far from what I like in an earphone. And then I had a chance to test out the AST, and I measured the frequency response, and I saw this graph, and frankly, it looks a lot like the frequency response graph on the ASX, but in fact, even more of the mud bass. So because it had even more of the mud bass and basically the same kind of design, I didn't even bother listening to it, because I shouldn't judge an earphone by its graph, but in that case, I was pretty confident that I wouldn't be interested in what I heard. Martin Ferreira, Mark, you are teaching potential competition how the pros do it. Hey, I think the more people measuring frequency responses, the better. In fact, let's jump back over here to squig.link. I am not only not worried about competition, I in fact am encouraging it. If you are interested in making your own frequency responses and you have access to a library of IMs, I'm actually happy to set you up with a squig.link URL. So some other reviewers I have here, like Aftersound, I helped him set up a frequency response measurements here on squig.link. We've also got Bad Guy, he's on squig.link. We've got Bedrock Reviews on squig.link. We've got Precog Vision, Paul Wasabi, Rakuto Goku, and I think bringing on board somebody else right now. So yeah, I'm not worried about competition. I think the more people measuring, the better for us. And if you're interested if you've got access to a bunch of IMs and you want to measure them, shoot me a question. I'll give you a link to where you can buy the microphone. And if you get into the act of it, look, it takes me some time to set people up with a squig link, but if you are committed to doing this, I'm definitely committed to helping you out and making sure that we get more measurements out there. Sumo saying that's a weird frequency response. I think you're referring to the FWX1. And I don't know if it's totally weird. It's not that weird. It's pretty typical V-shaped, I think. But it is pretty relaxed in the upper mid-range, which is interesting. John Doe say didn't know wood was this V-shaped. Now you know. I guess it depends on how you sleep. Johnny Welk saying listening on my FDX1 right now. There you go. There's a good earphone. Elazar saying, I'm looking for a neutral bright earphone, or I am around $200. I'm considering the Thea Audio Legacy 2. And the JVC looks interesting. How do they differ in regular use? So The Legacy 2, just up front, is not a very bright tuned earphone. I would describe it as roughly neutral, but the treble's kind of rolled off in there. So if you're looking for a little bit of brightness and excitement in the treble, I don't think the Legacy 2 is a great option. I think, you're looking for neutral, bright at around $200. The JVC FDX1 is honestly like probably the best you're going to get right there. It's a little bit outside that. It's around $250, although Drop did recently have it on sale for under $200, so keep an eye on that. But yeah, I think the FDX1 honestly is probably the best recommendation there. You could also consider something like Maga OC K5. It's a little bit on the warmer side, but it does have some brightness in the treble. It's a little hard to find too right now, but last I checked, Pinon Audio still has some Maga OC K5, so that should be, I think between the Maga OC and the FDX1, that's a couple of pretty good options. Oh, and Johnny Welk, it sounds like you have both the JVCs and the Legacy 2. So thanks for jumping in there with your own feedback. Big Boss, you're responding, you're saying you can export the measurements as text after getting the MDAT. Yeah, so in Rue, this is maybe a little bit of insider baseball with that measurement software, but by default, when you save the measurements, it saves them as MDAT files. I believe the MDAT files have all kinds of data in there, like the decay data and whatever else is measured with that sine sweep. But if you want to just have a table of the frequency, or of sort of the SPLs at different frequencies, the frequency response itself, you export it as a TXT, and that's what software like squig.link interprets. Anupam, oh hi Mark, how's it going? Nice to see you there, Tail. War Samir saying, what the mids doing? Yeah, the mids be chilling. I think the mids be chilling. Rob Hawk saying the channel imbalance could be a lost termite. It's possible. I think also worth calling out, and I'll just say like the number of units that I've tested on this is certainly inconclusive, but honestly my experience with the JVC FDX1 as well, FDX1, wrong emphasis, but the FDX1 honestly I think has some issues with channel imbalance. It is not as well controlled as a lot of IEMs out there. And maybe just we'll go back to the screen to show you. So this is, you see this gap between these two measurements, the left and the right channels, that indicates some level of channel imbalance. With the FDX1, I've only measured the left channel, so I don't show that, but I have in the past measured my FDX1. And in fact, this is a replacement because my first copy of the FDX1 had pretty significant channel imbalance. This second copy is pretty decent, but it's also not phenomenal. Whereas if you look at something like, and I think this would be a good example, the 111 Melee, this is not an expensive IEM. This is a $50 IEM, and you can see how much better the channel matching is here. Like this is what you want to see. Yes, there is some deviation, up here in the lower treble and in the air frequencies, but that's very, very minor. This is roughly what you want to see with most of these things, right? You can see though here's another really expensive IEM. This is like an $1,100 MEST. We've got some channel imbalance here. Again, how extensive that is, I don't think I'm going to hear that difference, but you do want to see if a $50 IEM can do this, you do kind of hope that an $1,100 or a $1,600 IEM can do at least as well. But unfortunately, not always the case. I think a lot of it probably has to do with manufacturing, just processes and scale. My guess is that something like the FWX1, the wood JVCs, and maybe all of JVC's more expensive IEMs, probably not produced in very high quantities. And when you're working in lower quantities, typically, I don't know, channel imbalances can be more pronounced. Although, if they're being handmade, then some IEMs, and this is fairly typical in the somewhat pricier Chi-Fi space, you'll have variance between units, but then as they're hand building them and hand matching them, they can measure the different units and match the left and right channels with units that have variance in sort of the same ways. Yeah, so again, I am personally not too concerned about the channel imbalance that I see here. I think that's roughly going to be inaudible, but you do still want to see better when you're paying a lot of money. It's kind of like when you buy a nice car and people are really particular about the panel gaps and going around and like making sure that the gap between the panels on the car, if you're not into cars, maybe you've never heard of this, maybe you're going to have a new OCD thing. But people that are really into cars, they buy a new car, they're really concerned about the lines between the gaps and like the door frame and the body of the car outside of the door, or the hood, basically all the different parts where the car fits together. They want those lines to be the same distance apart on every part, like kind of symmetrical, and then also, you know, lined up the same way. So they're not like, the panel gaps aren't kind of like off center like that. Does it actually make the car drive worse? Does it make it handle worse? No. Does it give it worse gas mileage? No. It's the sort of thing where you're spending money on something and you want those things to be right. I feel like that level of channel imbalance that we see at the JVC kind of falls into that category. Johnny Welk saying the Legacy 2s are no slouch and they fit a little easier, but the FDX1s are absurdly good for the price. I tend to agree. Toasters Make Tea, thank you for the contribution to the conversation about wood. Still catching up with live chat. Like Anam, hello Merc, what's up? How you doing? Lots of wood jokes, which again, I'm not above. Fernando P saying hi there from Brazil. Owned some wood IMs from JVC, good stuff, organic sound, but had fit issues. Okay. Javier saying they remind me of a pair of headphones that came with an MP3 player for a friend. You talking about like physically? Did you get some freebie IMs that looked like this or that sounded like that frequency response sounds? Tonkytron saying, if nothing else, it's one of the sexiest looking earphones I've seen. And yeah, look, I think this is a pretty handsome earphone. If you want to see a really sexy JVC though, check out, I believe it's the FW1000. Maybe it's the FW2000. Hold on. I've already confused myself with the JVC models, but they're top of the line single dynamic driver earphone. It is stunning. It's basically the same exact shape or same basic shape, but where it goes or where it connects from the MMCX connectors into sort of like this mount that suspends the earpieces, it looks phenomenal. But it's also like a $2,000 IM. Anthony Berryman saying, it would be cool if you can get to review the new Empire Ears Evo and the Mad 24 by Ambient Acoustics. Interesting. I wouldn't hold my breath. I have not, at this point, reviewed anything from Empire Ears. I did hear some stuff from Empire Ears, thanks to Precog and headphones.com. Just got to sample it for a couple of hours while he was over. But haven't been able to spend enough time with that stuff to review it. Audio Fool saying, I have the FW01 and more recently the FDX1, been interested in this one. I really like the FW01. So yeah, how would you compare the FW1 and the FDX1 since I don't have the FW01 to compare? Man, this numbering. Iggy, yes, I am planning to review the Triple Win Melee. It should be later this week. Oh, Oh, Shimon, you left me for a game of League of Legends? Wow, okay. Well, I'm glad you're back. Sean Dontremont saying that the ER2XR, the Etymotic ER2XR, with the brown filters is better than JVC anything. Which is a bold claim. That's a bold claim. I think I like the sound better on... I like the tonality better, actually, on the Etymotic. I think the Etymotic is closer, especially with the brown filters, closer to my preferences. But in the technical performance, the definition, the layering and stuff like that, I do think the JVC has Etymotic beat, especially in the bass quality. I think the bass quality on the FDX1 is chef kisses. And Sean, there's no dent reviews link on there because you're not on squig.link. All the links over here are to more squig links. See, it says more squig links. You're not on squig link, so I don't know what to say. Oh, and Kern, I have not tried the CCA NRA. That does seem like one of the latest in the flavor of the months, but no, I haven't tried it out. And then Winkern asking, is there a way to measure IM frequency response on a budget? The tool I use are not cheap. So I guess it depends really on what you mean by budget. There are some measurement devices out there that literally cost like thousands or maybe even tens of thousands of dollars. This does not. This was about $100 on AliExpress. And I know $100 is not especially cheap, but in comparison to, $1,000 rigs, it's pretty cheap. If you want to measure something even cheaper, there are some ways, like you could just get some sort of microphone, right? There's a microphone out there called the Dayton, I believe, and that's probably just the brand name. I'm sorry, I don't know the model number, but there's a Dayton microphone that people have used for measuring frequency responses. I believe it's fairly inexpensive, and you basically you couple the IM to the microphone with a tube, plastic tubing. That should save you some money. The graphs that you get won't be totally comparable to something like this, but it'll be pretty similar. And if you get enough graphs measured on the same rig, it'll start to become actually pretty informative. Yeah, and Sean, so I was mentioning that I had some issues with the channel imbalance on my FDX1. Sean Dontremont here is actually a guy out that I spent a lot of time talking with. He had the FDX1. I'm not sure what his current status is with that, but he's actually had quite a bit of issues with the channel imbalance. Now, whether or not the differences he's being able to measure in his models would be audible to me, I don't know about that. But I can definitely, again, see why you would expect the channel matching to be better. And what he's saying is I have a more extensive FDX1 comparison in my graph tool if you want to see how varied each set is. Oh, okay. Maybe we'll check that out right now. So you're not on squig.link, but if you want to go to dent.reviews, click on graphs. This is Sean's set of graphs. We'll filter this by JVC, and he's got a couple of different. He's had a couple of different models, which he's denoted here with S1. This is sample 1, and you can see that he's got some pretty similar channel variance, channel imbalance, where you got a little bit of imbalance here in the treble. I think the bass is probably more significant than the imbalance in the treble, at least based on how most of us hear. But there you go. That was sample number 1. Here's sample number 2. Ooh, headphone not found. Sean, got to get working on dent.reviews. Let's see. Here's sample 3. You can see, again, kind of different set of channel imbalances where you get these gaps here in the mid-range. I don't know. That one, that's a little bit suspect. I feel like these I would be more likely to hear than the variance at the extremes. So yeah, I'm not sure what it is. What's up with I'll do one more try. Okay, there we go. So there's sample 2, and you can see again, very similar channel imbalance to what we saw with sample 1. In fact, they almost looked exactly the same. Interesting. But yeah, I'm not sure what's up with drop and JVC. I don't know if this is a drop thing, a JVC thing, but it seems like the quality control between the units is not the greatest. Again, can I hear these differences? So far in my testing with the imbalances that I have measured, no. But you still don't want to see it. Philip Tyndall, just an irrelevant comment to say props to your haircut over the channel's growth. Your haircut has just excelled. Well, it's maybe like the opposite of a haircut. It's a hair not cut. But yeah, it's growing out. Is this good or is this bad? Is this too much hair? Should I get rid of it? Should I go back to short? Some days I feel like I definitely want to go back to short. And then other days I'm like, no, you know what? It's cool. I don't know. I wish hair was kind of like in video game where you can just try it on real quick and if you don't like it one day, you just change your character. But it didn't work that way. I mean, I guess if I got into wigs, maybe. When Kern, have I used Bilibili? I have Bilibili, that's YouTube, but in China. Yeah, I have not used it. For those who are not familiar with it, Bilibili, from what I understand, is basically just the Chinese version of YouTube. Someone mentioned it to me in a different review where they were saying that they were having a hard time finding reviews of Chi-Fi stuff on Bilibili, which was interesting because I'm here on YouTube reviewing Chi-Fi in English. But a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, Shenzhen Audio, the retailer who sends me a lot of earphones, they actually asked me if they could re-upload my videos to Bilibili with captions. And I said, yeah, they could do that. So I haven't actually followed up on how that's gone. I basically gave them the caveats that, yeah, if you want to upload it or you want to translate and upload my content to Bilibili, I think that sounds awesome to me. The only caveats were that I wanted to make sure that they weren't like editing the content to make it sound like I was saying things that I wasn't saying, which I have had that experience in the past with some rando company on Facebook that like edited one of my reviews of these knockoff AirPods, which in the review, I was like, these things suck. And somehow they turned my video into like a promo for them. I don't know how they did that. But that video had like way more views than my views ever get. So maybe I should be promoting knockoff AirPods on Facebook more often. Okay, Lycanom, another vote for the long hair. All right. Well then, if I don't do something about it, it's just gonna keep getting longer. At what point do I say stop? Or do I ever? Anthony asking question for a friend. Do you think the Dunu SA6 would have good synergy and pair well with File M11 Plus? Well, Anthony, your friend, I don't really like the question. No offense, but it's just like the whole concept of pairing earphones and headphones with sources, I just generally I don't see much in it. And that's just because to me, and if you've watched my reviews of sources in the past, they just all sound almost exactly the same to me. There's very, very little difference between sources. You can definitely hear some differences. You know, something like the i-Fi hip DAC, when I was comparing it to other portable DAC amps, it did seem a smidge warmer. Seemed like the upper mid-range was slightly relaxed, but like, it's the sort of difference that I'm only ever going to pick out if I'm listening to them like in head-to-head competition and I've got some sort of rig that makes it easy for me to swap between them. If I'm just listening to them in isolation, it's a difference that completely disappears. And because the difference is like that small, like it it doesn't seem like a good use of time to try and pair an earphone with a source. Like, I just treat all sources as the same. And if an earphone sounds good with one source, I'm pretty confident it's going to sound basically the same with every other source. So it's not the best answer, not the nicest answer, but that would be my honest opinion for your friend. Oh, Scott Pledger. Now that I put the idea out in the world, do you want to see me in a wig? You don't know that this isn't a wig, actually. Audio Pool, with the rig that you have for measuring, is there any attachment or way to use headphones? I'd be into spending a few bucks to be able to measure my IEMs and headphones. So no, this is not. So this is the microphone. It's got this entrance for IEMs, but there's no way to hook up an earphone or a headphone to this thing. There are some rigs on AliExpress that will let you do both. They're like GRAS clones that are made to fit over ear headphones, but they also have this sort of like entrance so that you can measure IEMs, I believe. I don't have one myself, so I haven't used it. But I believe you could get something like that. They're more expensive though, because they are a bigger rig. I think it costs around 300, maybe 350 bucks. Still not thousands of dollars like a real Gras rig, but also not very cheap. The other option, and what I decided to do because it was a little bit cheaper, was I actually just got these in-ear microphones that I can wear on my head, wear the headphone on my head and measure the frequency response that way. Now, the big caveats here, there's actually two really big caveats. One, my head is not industry standard, so I can really only reasonably compare frequency responses that have all been made on my head. Otherwise, even using the same microphones on someone else's head is going to give me a different frequency response because people got different ears, and that really does play into the way that people hear things. And it plays into how the microphone inside your ear is going to hear things. The other big caveat with the in-ear microphones, and I didn't fully appreciate this until I started using it, is consistency. Like, even just how I fit the in-ear microphones in my ears drastically changes the frequency responses that I get, to the point that from one day to the, like, it's hard for me to take a measurement on one day and compare it to a measurement I take another day, because I don't know that the microphones are fitted the exact same. So it becomes not super useful for building out a database. I do have a small database of these measurements that I've made, but they're really only comparable when I made the measurements on the same day with the same fitting of the in-ear microphones. So that's an option, but I think if you wanted to get serious about it, I would just recommend, I think the around $300 Gras clone on AliExpress looks like a pretty good setup, but I don't have experience with it. Scott Pledger asking, I don't think I've ever asked, are you a programmer? The only people I can think of who are aware of Link TLD are programmers. Interesting. So I'll say I found the link TLD via hover.com. That's like my preferred domain registration site. I know like GoDaddy or something like that's probably the most common one, but hover.com I find to be the most user-friendly. If you're registering a domain, this is hashtag not sponsored, but hover.com is pretty good, and they had .link, so that's how I was available or aware of it. That said, the question, am I a programmer? I mean, I do some coding on the side. I do a little bit of front-end code. In fact, I made some contributions to Squig.link. Squig.link is based on CrinGraph open source software, and I made some contributions to that open source software to add some functionality to it, like the link sharing and stuff like that. But my ability to program is fairly limited to HTML, CSS, and fairly basic JavaScript. I do work in product management, though, in web development, so I have that background. Johnny Welk, I have not tried the Thea Audio Oracles. I'm interested in it, but I haven't had a chance, no. Yeah, Sean, my head is not industry standard, and it definitely explains a lot. It explains not only why I like the Moondrop SSR so much, but I think it also explains why I'm an idiot. Sam, is it worth it to buy premium IMs instead of mid-range over-ear headphones? Does the sound quality scale more in IMs? I think IMs and headphones I find them hard to compare in terms of sound quality. They're different, they're better at different things. So I think IMs, if you want really strong sub-bass emphasis, IMs I think are better at that. I think that's an advantage of IMs versus over-ear headphones. If you want really good layering and I'm gonna say soundstage, if you just want a really good sense of depth and this 3D sense, I think over-ear open back headphones are better at that than IMs are. IMs can do it pretty well, but over-ear headphones have a better chance or do a better job of that. Which ones do I prefer in my life? I use IMs a lot more often, and it's not just because I think they sound better. I think again they excel at different things, but I just always like small things. I love small electronics. I love small motorcycles. I have a small car. I've got a Mazda Miata. I've got a Honda Grom. I've got I love small earphones. I got small digital audio players. I've got an iPhone mini. I like a 13-inch MacBook. I like small stuff. So for me, I just kind of gravitate toward things that are small. I play games on small consoles, handheld stuff. I just gravitate toward that, and it makes me more flexible. I can move around the house more easily with IMs. I don't really like the sound of closed back headphones, and in-ear microphones will give you the isolation and sort of the private listening that you don't get with an open back headphone, right? If I'm listening to an open back headphone on the couch with my wife while she's watching TV, we're interfering with each other. We're causing problems. So IMs don't have that problem. Closed back headphones would solve that problem, but I don't like closed backs, hence IMs. So there's a number of reasons why I prefer IMs most of the time, but sometimes I prefer open backs. So I don't know, if I could only have one just for sound quality, I would probably go with open back headphones, but for how they fit my life, I would actually probably go IMs. Oh, Scott, you're also a front-end guy. Okay, I knew you were a developer of some sort. Jorge asking, have I used the Android app Neutralizer for DSP tone neutralization? Quite interesting. No, I haven't used that app. I don't do a lot of EQ or tone correction of the stuff I listen to. Usually when I do, I'm just trying to test stuff. I'm listening to an earphone. I'm like, oh, it sounds like it's missing some 2K. So I'll use an EQ, bump up to 2K, confirm or deny that that actually makes it sound the way I thought it would. But yeah. So I haven't used that app. I know there are a number of different apps out there that do similar stuff. Maybe that one's especially good, but I haven't tried it. Johnny Welk saying, my Focal Elects are my favorite way to listen to music, but I agree, IMs just work all the time anywhere. Yeah, and I don't have a Focal Elects, I have the Sennheiser HD600. I don't have any IMs that I like as much as the HD600 in terms of sound, but I don't listen to the HD600 all the time because it's an open back headphone, and I just talked about why I prefer IM. So in my life, I can't sleep with an HD600 either. At least, I don't know. I guess you could try. But yeah, in my life, just IMs make more sense. Coffee and Cam offering their take, saying, I usually prefer IMs too. They're much more comfortable, and I don't have to worry about bad seals. I wear glasses. Yeah, that's a good point too. When you're wearing an over-ear headphone and you wear glasses, not all headphones are sensitive to this, but a lot of times the pad of the headphone is essentially creating a seal around your ears, and the band, what do you call them, the arms on your glasses can be enough to disrupt that seal and actually bleed some of the bass, and actually pretty significantly change the sound. And yeah, you don't have to worry about that with an IM that goes in the ear. You might have other fit concerns with an IM, but you don't have to worry about glasses. Oh, Anthony, you've got an HD 600 from 1999. That's awesome. But yeah, folks, I think that's going to have to do it for this stream. Thank you all for tuning in and for the chat. Like I always say, if you want to continue the chat, do check out the link to my Discord server in the description down below. I spend way too much time there. We can have a chat. But otherwise, if you're looking for the review for the JVC FWX1, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and then I'll catch you on the next super review. Have a good week.